The National Hurricane Center now, their advisory from 11 o'clock. Look at this, winds at 180 miles per hour, Category 5 hurricane. This is amazing stuff here for us. In fact, I saw a tweet from the National Hurricane Center. Irma now, at this point, the strongest hurricane on record in the Atlantic, outside of the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. Strongest on record. Unbelievable. Moving now to the west at 14 miles per hour, an extremely dangerous hurricane getting closer and closer to the Leeward Islands. Let's talk about that forecast and show you where this thing's going to be heading. Pretty good agreement here as this thing will be moving on off towards the west-northwest, scooting across the northern portions of the Leeward Islands, heads up there the U.S. Virgin Islands, British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico as well. And then as we work towards the end of the week, looking towards the island of Hispaniola, the Bahamas, Cuba, and then you can see heading into the weekend, now we've got portions of Florida implicated in this as well, including around Miami. We still want to be vigilant here along the East Coast as well as the West Coast. Certainly want to be prepared for potential impacts from Hurricane Irma. Tampa doing a good job right now. Already the city of Tampa offering sandbags to residents there in preparation for Irma. That is certainly a good thing to be doing. All right, let's talk about some of these warnings that are in place. Tropical storm warnings off towards the south. You head up into the purple zones. That's where we've got hurricane warnings that are in place, including Antigua. A tweet from Antigua, their actual Met service there, basically saying in that tweet, I'm going to get this right, they say, may the Lord bless our souls. And that is no doubt a thing to be saying, because this is a system that is not to be messed around with and is going to be very, very dangerous for some of these islands. Hurricane watches are also up as well, that including now portions of the Dominican Republic. So we're talking about now the eastern half of the island of Hispaniola, dealing with hurricane watches there, expecting to see the potential for some hurricane conditions in the next 36 hours or so.
Live in our Extreme Weather Center with a look at where this thing is headed. Hey, Janice.
Julie, this is a very powerful storm. This is the visible satellite image, and you can see as the sun comes out, look at this perfect Category 5 storm, 175 mile per hour sustained winds. At its peak, Katrina was 175. We haven't seen a storm of this strength in 10 years since Felix in 2007. And the National Hurricane Center is saying we're going to have a Category 5 for maybe a day or two. So watching this, the northern Leeward Islands, you're in trouble right now, unfortunately. We are dealing with a very strong, potentially dangerous storm moving your way. Then we watch Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, the Bahamas, Cuba, and there's the center of the storm. But I don't want people to pay attention to the center, because there is the potential 5 days out that this moves south of that center or north of that center. But certainly right now, Florida Keys, South Florida, making your preparations now. Very warm water ahead of the storm. That's why the potential is there for it to maintain its Category 5 status for the next 24 to 48 hours. There's the computer models. Very good agreement until Friday. And then we start to see the trough that will potentially influence the storm coming from the north. And then we think making a right-hand turn. But again, we got to watch this, because anything can happen 5 days out. I know Florida, you're in the crosshairs here. Gulf of Mexico, though, you need to be prepared. East Coast also needs to be prepared. One thing is for certain, Julie, this is a very dangerous storm that could potentially be deadly. So we need to make our preparations now.
All right. Thank you so much, Janice Dean.
Story developing right now. Hurricane Irma strengthening to a Category 5, moving west in the Atlantic toward Puerto Rico and South Florida. American Airlines, in fact, right now adding extra flights out of St. Martin and St. Kitts and Nevis. Meteorologist Adam Klotz is tracking all of this for us, and he has the very latest. Adam?
Heather, this one continues to grow. Take a look at these wind speeds. Currently 180 miles an hour as we slowly watch this thing track off toward the west at 14 miles an hour. Very defined eye wall there, looking like a very powerful storm, and it is. These are some of the highest wind totals we have seen in quite some time. This is all-time Atlantic Basin, number 5 on the list at 180 miles an hour. The strongest winds ever were just 190 miles an hour. That was Allen back in 1980. But we're getting up that direction, so a very, very strong storm, which is why we now see hurricane watches and warnings stretching now across the Caribbean. Everything you're looking at in the red, those are hurricane warnings, including areas of all of Puerto Rico, San Juan. This system is going to be moving, at least currently looking as though it's going to run right to the north of all of these islands, right along the coastline for many of them. Here's what that path is looking like as it runs over the islands, and this is important to note. You're looking at Wednesday there, then running over to Thursday as you get into the San Juan, Puerto Rico area, actually just past it. But you run over the islands, you begin to get cut off from some of that warm water, that moisture, and it does begin to weaken just a tad, falling down to a Category 4 storm. But there you are in the Bahamas, and by Friday and Saturday, you begin to run up closer and closer to areas of South Florida. At that point, we have a decision to make. Is this thing going to continue on this general track, or is it going to turn to the north? All indications right now is it takes a very sharp turn. It hits some very strong winds, a trough moving through the area. That wind catches it and runs it right into Florida, right into the southeast. But again, it's all going to be reliant on those very strong upper level winds in that trough that's going to do the steering for this particular system. And that is good news because that would keep it out of the Gulf of Mexico. Otherwise, it would run right in. Category 5 hurricanes, they're rare. We've only seen 28 of them in the Atlantic basin ever. Irma, one of the longer running, and these are all the past. Usually they're fairly short-lived, but obviously this one is one we're going to be paying very close attention to as it's going to start to run through tonight, Heather. Some of those islands beginning to see the brunt of this.
All right, going to be a very busy night for
Yes,
you.
it is.
Adam Klotz, thank you.
Residents in Florida and the Caribbean are getting prepared well in advance ahead of Hurricane Irma. Irma strengthened more on Tuesday.
Hurricane Irma is now a Category 5 hurricane. Winds are sustained at 175 miles per hour.
While Irma's exact path is still not known, many in Florida not taking any chances, stocking up on water, food, batteries, generators, and much more.
Whether it comes or not, this is stuff we need and we can use for future, so we don't have to go through this again.
While it'll be a few days until Irma makes a U.S. landfall, residents still have Hurricane Harvey fresh on their minds, which hit Texas just a few weeks ago.
Don't want to be stuck out like everyone else is usually, late shopping, going for last minute things. There's nothing there.
I think everybody's kind of preparing a little more since what went on in Texas, and that's why we're here.
For the latest on Hurricane Irma, head over to AccuWeather.com.
The area are stocking up in case Hurricane Irma does impact our area.
Yeah, he had a 3-day weekend, so a lot of people used Labor Day to hit the grocery store. Shayla Reeves is live at the Publix right now in South Tampa, and it looks like they're pretty stocked up, Shayla.
Hey, good morning to you. The doors just opened minutes ago, and it took very little time for people to make their way to the water aisle. We're seeing more and more people making their way down that aisle on your screen, each one grabbing either a gallon of water, a case of water, their carts filled with jar after jar after jar, all in preparation for this Hurricane Irma. So in the meantime, though, we know that the Florida Division of Emergency Management is encouraging people, if you're going to make that disaster kit, that disaster supply kit, you want to make sure you have enough water, at least a gallon per person per day, for at least 3 to 7 days. So that can really add up there for you. And certainly we're seeing people starting to grab some of the cases here near the front of the store, and they're also grabbing some of the gallon jugs like this one here by the register. And we're also seeing people pick up some of those non-perishable food items, such as your canned soups, for example. And you don't want to forget, in a case like this, your pets. So when you're talking about preparing for a weather event, we often think about ourselves, but your pets need to eat too. So people are stocking up on food for their pets. They're stocking up on batteries for any of their items that might require those. This, of course, comes as we're continuing to monitor the course of Hurricane Irma. Dave tracking that as we get closer and closer to the weekend. So we are going to continue to stay out here, hopefully get a chance to connect with a few more people who are out here shopping. I had a chance just a short time ago to talk with a couple of shoppers on the water aisle. One lady told me she wanted to get out here as early as possible. She wasn't just shopping for herself, she was shopping for her children, for her grandkids. One gentleman saying there's only so much you can do to prepare. When they tell you to prepare, but when it gets down to it, really we have to wait and see what Mother Nature has in store. But getting water is just one part of that process that some people are taking seriously as we inch closer and closer to the weekend with this storm, guys.